attendance. Alex,
Yes, ma'am.
Archana,
Present, ma'am.
Asish,
Yes, ma'am.
Nitish,
Yes, ma'am.
Evan,
Yes, ma'am.
Jeju,
Yes, ma'am.
Marina, Ninju,
Yes, ma'am.
Nishan, Sui,
Present, ma'am.
Prakriti,
Present, ma'am.
Prasamsha, Pravin, Pravin, Raman, Ratna,
Present, ma'am.
Rebison, Ritesh,
Present, ma'am.
Riwaz, not there, Ronim,
Yes, ma'am.
Sacham, not there, Tina, Sarishma,
Yes, ma'am.
Shekhar, I think it was Sarishma, right? Shekhar, Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
Swaroop, Munish,
Present, ma'am.
anybody who came during the attendance? Okay, Shekhar. Anyone else? Right, I guess that's it, right? With the attendance. Now, today, let's move ahead. We were doing listening, right? Oral communication in business. So, there is not much to cover regarding oral communication and listening in business. So, what we'll be doing today is we'll be going through whatever we did in the past two classes regarding listening, okay? The discussion, let's say, and we'll be going to your assignment for learning objective 3. So, regarding listening, I will play an audio clip Now that particular audio clip also contains video. Okay, so I'll be playing that video. So what you need to do for that assignment is you need to listen very carefully. Okay, after the discussion, we'll go to that clip. Listen carefully. If required, take notes. Right, and after that, you're supposed to write your understanding based on that listening. Right, so I'll explain that again. First, let's move to the discussion part then. The first thing we had discussed when we started learning objective 3 was why was oral communication so important? Why was speaking and listening so important? Right? We discussed on that. And it was important because it helped us communicate, grow, strengthen our company, right? And there were so many other things, so many other benefits of communicating verbally. Because when we communicated verbally, we could understand the other person better. When we are face to face, we can exchange more thoughts, more information, right? We can even see the other person's reactions. So, in this way, oral communication was important. And under oral communication, we as business people, we required the skill of listening, right? Because without listening, okay, am I not audible?
Ma'am, you are a little low sound.
Actually, I'm having some internet issues here, so please bear with me, right?
Sure, ma'am.
Is it fine now?
Yeah, if you talk like that.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to listening skills. I believe you remember these 5 skills we went through. The first one was pay attention. So, as listeners, we needed to pay attention, right? Because paying attention means you are giving time to your speaker. And then the second point, show that you're listening, was kind of synonymous to paying attention. If we didn't pay attention, we couldn't show that we were listening, right? And we could show our speaker that we are listening through various kinds of activities, various kinds of non-verbal communication, just like nodding our head to the listener, that shows that we agreed to what the listener was saying, or if we disagree to anything, right? Or sometimes, like if we are using our mobile phones in front of the speaker, the message goes that we are not interested in the speaker at all. So, those things showed whether you are listening or not. Sometimes, when you take notes, listening to the speaker from okay, I think I had some internet issues. I got disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So we were talking about the first 2 points, how we needed to show that we are listening, right? The next point was providing feedback. So whenever the speaker gave you an opportunity, a chance to speak, whenever the speaker asked you something, asked a question, so always provide a feedback, means answer back or say something. Whenever you asked, give your opinions, right? So we are supposed to provide feedback. Similarly, defer judgment means don't judge anyone Don't judge a speaker. Maybe the topic the speaker is speaking about, you already know about that topic. Even more, don't just assume that I know everything. I don't need to listen to the speaker. Instead, there might be other explanations, right? So that is why always listen to your speaker carefully. The last one was respond appropriately. So responding appropriately was connected with providing feedback, right? So while we are responding appropriately means we have good manners while we respond. We have good behavior. We respond or talk politely to the speaker. Even if we have a negative feedback, we have to give a bad opinion. We speak humbly and respectfully. We don't scream and shout, and we don't humiliate the speaker. So that is responding appropriately. And these five were the most important listening skills, right? Now let's move on. The next one we went through were problems of listening. There were three problems basically: pseudo listening, selective listening, and critical listening. So, pseudo listening was fake listening. It's just like somebody pretending to listen, right? Somebody just nodding your head as if that person understands everything, but in reality, that person is just nodding his or her head out of nowhere without listening, without understanding, right? So that is pretending to listen, right? The other one was selective listening. It is being distracted by something around you, distracted by sound, or distracted by something, distracted by a painting on the wall, or distracted by your phone. So it can be anything, right? So that is selective listening. And because we get distracted, our mind, okay, our concentration goes on to the distraction or the distracting object. So that is why we're not able to listen carefully, and it becomes selective listening. The next one is critical listening. So, critical listening is like being bothered by something. You have something going on in your mind. Mentally or emotionally, you are disturbed. So, that is critical listening. You are physically present there in front of the speaker, but you are thinking of something else, right? So, that is being bothered by something, right? So, these three were the problems. Do you have any questions here?
No, ma'am.
That's great. Now, the next one we went through were active and passive listening. I think you are really clear on this. So, active listening was when we focused on the speaker, on what the speaker was saying, along with interacting with the speaker or answering the speaker whenever the speaker asked something, not being distracted, not physically, not emotionally, not psychologically, right? So when we're not distracted, when we're listening clearly and understanding everything what the speaker is saying, that is active listening. And while we are doing some active listening, we have to put much effort there, right? Lots of effort and energy is put into active listening because we have to listen, we have to process it in our brain. Maybe some of us we take notes, that's also energy and effort. Maybe some of us try to interpret it in our mind, that's also effort, right? And also in active listening, we do not judge anyone or we do not pre-assume, right? We clearly listen whoever the speaker might be or whatever the topic might be, right? And just opposite to active listening was passive listening. So passive listening was effortless because the listener didn't have to do anything at all. The listener could just sit and pretend to listen. The listener could sleep, close his or her eyes, look here and there. So that is passive listening. And while we have to choose between active and passive listening, it's always appropriate to be an active listener because an active listener doesn't only make his or her speaker feel good or motivate the speaker, But an active listener gains much knowledge. An active listener learns very much, right, in the process. So after that, we went through the traits of listening, right? So what were the traits of listening? So on your screen, you can see these points. Let's go through these very quickly. Okay. So the first three and the most important traits were concentration, attention, and body language, right? Concentration, as in we need to concentrate so that we can understand and interpret the speaker. And regarding attention, paying attention is kind of different than concentration because while we pay attention, it means we are giving our time to the speaker. We are not being distracted here and there. And the third one, body language, we watched a small video, short video regarding body language too, how a listener should behave, how a listener's body should react, what we should do, what we should not, right? Under body language, I think there were a few, just like if you are crossing your arms in a meeting, it meant that you're not interested when you're folding your arms, right? Or if you're leaning too back on the chair, that means that you're lazy. Or if you're leaning too much forward, that meant that you're aggressive, right? Or pointing a finger at someone, again, showed rudeness. You're not supposed to point your finger at anybody, right? Or sometimes just staring at someone, not looking at the speaker, but staring at the speaker. That's also very rude. So we must take care of these things while we are listeners, while you attend meetings and conferences, or let's say there might be an internal team meeting in your office. So there also you need to maintain your body language. And that is how you can present yourself as a good listener, right? And sometimes, like, we just tend to check our watch while someone is speaking, or we tend to look at our phones. That's also bad manners, right? Or let's say we walk into a meeting hall with our heads hung down, looking down. So that gave a message to the other people or to your speaker that you are a very low confident person, right? So we must walk straight. So these things were regarded in body language as listeners. And the other things were, the next one is being alert as in trying to connect or trying to understand what the speaker is saying. If there is any mistake the speaker is making, any huge mistakes, small mistakes, we need to understand for that, right? Or is there anything going around in your surrounding, in the environment outside the meeting hall? You always need to remain alert for those kinds of things, right? The next one was understanding. Now we need to be understanding towards the speaker because we cannot just expect that the speaker is a perfect human being. Everyone makes mistakes, right? So that is what we need to understand about the speaker. Sometimes there might be grammatical errors while the speaker is speaking. So it doesn't mean that you go and correct the speaker or you make fun of the speaker. Instead, we are supposed to understand that human beings make mistakes. It's it's all right to make mistakes and there is always space and time to correct, right? The next one was caring, and we had put caring and empathetic synonymously. Just like empathetic meant that we need to understand the feelings of others too. Yes, Archana, do you want to say something?
No, ma'am. Mistakenly.
Oh, okay, that's fine. All right. So, regarding empathetic, understanding the feelings or understanding the situation of the speaker, right? Because sometimes, I think I had given you this example that the speaker tripped and fell down. So what do you do? Do you sit down there and become sympathetic? Oh, poor speaker. Do we say that or do we go and help? Right? So that's being caring and empathetic in those kinds of situations. The next one was unemotional. not being too emotional towards the speaker or towards the topic, right? We must not be emotional and attached. And similarly, the next one was interested. So sometimes there might be meetings which we do not understand at all. There might be conferences which is not related to our field, but still, sometimes we can show interest in different things so as to gain knowledge, right? The next one was being patient as a listener, because we can't expect every speaker to finish their speech or explain something in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We have to understand, we have to be patient, we have to give time to the speaker to speak properly and explain. Now, if we try to hurry the speaker might miss out important points, right? So it depends on the speaker. It differs from individual to individual. So that's why, as listeners, we must be patient. And regarding being patient, we need to remember that we must not also wait for hours and hours. If the speaker is taking long hours, maybe the speaker is taking like 6 to 7 hours for one particular meeting, that's also not good, right? So we must tackle the situation accordingly, right? The next one was non judgmental. So this is similar to differing judgment. We must not assume something, we must not prejudge, because whatever we already know, the speaker might have another explanation to it, right? The speaker might have another logic or another definition to the same thing. So it's always good to listen once before we judge or assume something, right? And the next 2 points were responsive and providing feedback. So being responsive and providing feedback, they're kind of similar, and we've already gone through these in the last slide also. We must always respond whenever the speaker is giving you an opportunity to speak, and while providing, like while responding, we must always be polite, be respectful towards the speaker, no matter what our opinion is. It might be a positive opinion, negative opinion, but we must always present it respectfully, right? So these were the traits we went through. Now the next one we went through was listening process. So it had 5 stages. The 3 stages in the middle are categorized under stage 2 because all these 3 stages in the middle, they are conducted in the brain. The activity is conducted in the same place, the brain. So that is why they can be categorized into one stage also. Or if not, we can categorize them into 3 different stages. So the first stage was receiving data or information, any message, right? So when we received any message, that sound or that message, that piece of information hits our ear and then sends the information or the message to our brain. After that, the message reaches our brain, and then the brain tries to understand and interpret the message. So after understanding the message, what the brain will do is decide, is this piece of information important or not? Should I remember this information or is it not important? Can I forget it? So how long should I remember this information for? So the brain decides on this. After that, it goes to evaluating. Do I agree with this piece of information or do I not agree? How should I respond? So these things are decided in the brain, after which we come to the feedback stage, where in the feedback stage, the listener responds. The listener gives his or her opinion, right? So this is the listening process here. And similarly, we had also gone encoding and decoding. I have not kept it here. So encoding was similar in the listening process. It's sending the message by the sender, that's encoding, and decoding was through the receiver's part, when the receiver received and interpreted the message, right? So any questions regarding the listening process? Any confusion until here? Okay, the next one is barriers of effective listening, right? These were the few barriers we had discussed. So the first one was excessive talking. So when there are lots of speakers, when you're talking in a group of friends, and when everybody is talking, you as a listener, you'll not be able to listen carefully or focus on a particular individual, right? Because many people will be talking all at once, and you as a listener will get confused. So that's excessive listening. Oh, sorry, excessive talking. And then, due to excessive talking, we're not able to listen properly. Right? The next one was partial listening. So, partial listening was similar to the problems of listening. It's like we are physically present there in front of the speaker, but we are distracted by something or our mind is somewhere else. The next one was prejudgment, that is, pre assuming. If we assume something, if we judge the speaker or if we judge the topic beforehand, again, that will not let us understand and listen carefully, right? And the fourth one here is distractions. So, under distractions, there are various kinds of distractions. Just like our phone buzzing, that's also a distraction. The vehicles or the traffic outside, that's also a distraction. Maybe there is a plane flying over the building, that's a distraction, or the clock ticking, right? Children screaming. So, those all are distractions which distract us, distract our mind to that particular thing, right? So, because of distractions, we are not able to listen carefully. The next one was linguistic barriers. Those are especially language issues when the speaker and the listener they do not understand the same language, right? The next one was misunderstanding when the speaker or let's say when the listener misinterprets. Sometimes the listener might misinterpret whatever the speaker is saying, or sometimes the speaker might misinterpret the listener while the listener is giving some kind of response or opinions. So there might be misunderstanding through both parts, the speaker and the listener, and that can create a barrier. That can create a barrier in the listener that, okay, I have misunderstood. So the listener's mind is going in another path and the speaker is speaking something else, right? So that can cause misunderstanding. The next one is lack of interest. So, lack of interest is when we are not interested at all, when we are not interested to sit in the hall, or not interested in that topic, not interested in the conference, will not be able to understand a thing, right? The next one is noise. So, noise are different kinds of sounds which distract us basically, right? And there's interruption whenever somebody interrupts in between the flow which the speaker was speaking and the flow which the listener was listening, that will be stopped, and it might be difficult to catch up again with the same flow, right, due to interruption. The next one is bringing in emotions. When we become too emotional also, we might forget where we are, we might forget what we were discussing on, and we think in our own mind. We start to create stories and we start to think about various kinds of things, being emotional, right? We might become very happy or very sad. We might want to cry. So, as the listeners, we must not be emotional. We must not flow into our emotions. Instead, as listeners, we must just listen and try to analyze the thing. The next one was negative towards speaker. So sometimes listeners might not like the speaker, right? So at those times, when you don't like the speaker, you'll not want to listen to him or her. So at those times also, you'll not be able to listen. So the listener might think like, I don't like the speaker, so why should I stay in the meeting? I won't go to the meeting. So if the listener won't go to the meeting or won't pay attention to the speaker at all, he or she will lose important information maybe, right? So those were the few barriers. And after that, we had gone to some external barriers too. So speaker is not loud enough. Just I think like a while ago, Sarishma told me that I was not loud enough and she could not hear me well. So that was also an external barrier. It was preventing you all as listeners to hear me out well, right? So the speaker needs to be loud and clear so that all the listeners can hear properly, right? Now, these things get applied in huge halls or huge conference rooms where a speaker needs a mic to speak. Sometimes the electricity just goes off and there is a problem. The speaker is not heard in the huge hall. So, these kinds of things might happen, right? The second one is speaker's appearance. So, sometimes how the speaker looks, how the speaker is dressed up, how is the speaker's hair set up. So, these things matter. These things might distract the listener, right? And there is external noise, so noise from outside the room or outside the hall. And there is room temperature, too much hotness or too much coldness, that can also become a barrier that can distract or stop the listener from listening. If the temperature is very, very hot, you are sweating in the room, you'll not be able to concentrate on the speaker. Or if it's too cold, you're freezing. At that time, also, it'll be difficult for the listener to listen carefully, right? The next one is phone calls. Whenever we have phone calls, we get distracted. Maybe like we just cut the call, but still we get distracted for a few seconds, right? Then there is clock watching. So regarding clock watching, what we had discussed was where should the clock be placed? If the clock is placed behind the speaker or on top of the speaker, all the listener's eyes shall go to that clock where it's clearly visible. But if the clock is placed behind the listeners, where the listeners have to turn back to look at the clock, that will prevent the listeners to be distracted from clock watching, right? The next one was time pressure or deadlines. It might be deadlines of assignments or reports, any kind of submissions. So these kinds of things might also stop us from listening to a speaker. The next one was uncomfortable seat arrangements. So these might also just make us so conscious in the present moment that we forget to listen to the speaker. So just like we are having this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic right now. So if in a room we are seated too close without maintaining any distance, our mind will have an unconscious effect that we were supposed to maintain distance, but we are seated so close. So that will bring anxiety in the speakers and it will not let the in the listeners, I mean, yes. And that will not make the listeners listen carefully, right? So these were the things we had discussed in the past two classes regarding learning objective 3. Now, please tell me if you have any questions or any confusion here.
No, ma'am.
Okay, that's great. So shall we move to the assignment? Now, if we were in class, like I could have showed you this clip in class and we could have watched it together. But now, because we are here in this virtual classroom, now we have to go in this way. So what we will do is, I will play a clip, okay? It's not that long. It's less than an hour, okay? Far less than an hour. So while that clip is being played, carefully. And the second point here, write your understanding and analysis of the clip after listening to it. So when you are listening, you can take notes, okay? You can jot down important points. And then after finishing listening, you're supposed to write a short piece. Now, I won't ask you to write 2 or 3 page long answer or understanding. I'll just ask you like maybe 100 to 150 words. That's half a page, okay? So you write only that much after listening and understanding to the speech, all right? So any questions regarding this? You understood what you need to do, right?
So you will play something in this class itself?
Yes. Yes. Now, Now, if you were in class, now this was a part of our class. So
Mm-hmm.
now we cannot go to the physical class, so we have to do it here itself. Okay. So let's say this is a listening test.
Okay.
All right. So I'll be playing that. If you need, please note down points because while listening only once, you might forget so many things, right? And I don't want you to write lots and lots of things in the answer. Just write half a page. That will be enough. Okay. And don't worry, I'll give you time for the assignment submission. So let's go to the clip then. Okay, I'm going to play this for a while. Please let me know if it's visible and audible, okay?
I'm running short of words right now, but I cannot afford this because
Was it audible?
Yes, ma'am. It is visible and audible.
It's visible, right? Okay, so let me just give you a brief background. And it would be good if you use earphones, headphones if possible, right? If not, it's fine. You can listen however you want to. So she is Muniba Mazari, okay, and she's from Pakistan. I think like